Thank you. Thank you for coming to this session. And well, I think that it's actually very related to Bas's presentation. But Bas shared a lot about adopting LAS. But here, I would like to provide somewhat an alternative approach that we can get benefit from LAS. So here's my view. Actually, I look at this, LAS is not only about framework. So to me, it at least have two kind of explicit parts. One is this framework, and the other one is there are lots of experiments. So I think that we can use these kind of two approaches. I call them framework folks and experiment folks. They are not really mutually exclusive. They actually supplement each other. But nevertheless, then the way that we try to benefit from these are somewhat different. So I'm going to shortly look at the framework folks approach and share some of the sort of common pitfalls related to the idea of adopting a framework. And then we will move beyond that and look at that how we can make better use of those LAS experiments. Interestingly, even though we are talking about framework folks, we still need to start with experiments, because this is everything where everything got started. So I'm not sure you have, if you know that those two frameworks, LAS and LAS huge, they initially were actually presented as the experiments. So in the first two books, both books actually included this try. So try framework 1 and try framework 2. If you look at that framework 1 and framework 2, they're very similar to what LAS and LAS huge frameworks are today. But at least there's one major difference, I would say, because they were presented as experiments. Then experiments are experiments. So this is another experiment, kind of meta-level experiment. It says try experiment rather than improve. So it explains well that once the framework 1, framework 2 were presented, these were just experiments. So why these are just experiments? I think this explains very well. It says that systems are too complex and variable to assume prescriptive advice will work. So, but somehow, Bas and Craig, I suppose that they changed their mind at some point. So they still decided to formalize these experiments into frameworks which are defined by rules. Right? For rules, it's prescriptive. You need to follow rules. Right? So, but why? Why did they do that? Because they know this, but they still decided to formalize it into a real framework. So this is the main reason, I know, and I think they explain that as this is related to the Suhari learning mode. So those rules, those prescriptive rules are for novice group to get started. Right? That's the initial idea of having the framework. But there are a few things that I feel we need to be cautious about when talking about frameworks or when talking about adoption. The first one is improvement continuity. Because when we think of adopting a framework, we quite often try, those things are kind of associated with like transformation and change project. The thing is, the pitfall about this change project idea is quite often we expect it will get done at a certain point because it's a project. Then once this change project is over, then the improvement is stopped. So this is something that we need to be very cautious about when you start to say, oh, we start to adopt a framework. Well, let's try to actually address this issue by introducing an explicit LAS principle, which is called continuous improvement towards perfection. This is great, but still, I think it's still quite misleading when we say, well, we would like to adopt less framework. Then people will ask, then when do we get done? And then you answer that, oh, there's only beginning, but there's no end. Well, that's a real message, right? But somehow it doesn't fit to the mental model that we get used to when we say adopt framework. We expect that it will get done. So, but in practice, how do we implement this principle, continuous improvement towards perfection? Sometimes I call it experiment after framework. So you first have the framework folks. You look at like what in Buz's presentation, he will explain that how can we work on those structural issues and so on. But after that, we need to shift the folks back to the experiment. That's where continuous improvement happens. Second thing that we need to be cautious when we say adopting framework is about ownership. Because frameworks are prescriptive, they are created by someone else, right? Usually we own the solution better if we are part of creating this solution, right? So this, let's try to address this concern by defining less as barely sufficient, right? Not too much, still leaves room for people to figure out what to do. And then let's promote a lot to this own, not rent mentality. Like for example, in CLP, we spend lots of effort in explaining why. Actually, not only explaining why, but also inviting people to reason together in understanding their why. Hopefully, the people who decide to adopt less framework could own it. Right? So this is the second thing regarding this kind of concerns with the framework. The third thing is improvement capability. Well, if you look at what's in this last framework, you can look at that as a bunch of changes. Like you need to implement feature team. Not only that, but also let multiple feature teams share one product backlog. You want to actually shift the management focus from the specific scope of the product to improving the organizational system, and so on. So it's really a lot of change. I call it a big batch change. If you want to implement framework, then that would require high change capability, which is often missing in the organization. Right? So when I see this, it's just not a match. Of course, we can try to, for example, getting external help. In some situations, it's not an option. Then I would say, one idea is to get back to the experiment, because the experiments are really provide excellent opportunity to grow that change capability. So this is what I call experiment before framework. So you start with experiment to build and grow your change capability so that one day you probably can deal with that complexity with a big batch of change. Okay, regardless of whether we need to experiment before or after the framework folks, then we need to get back to the experiment. So I'm going to move on in explaining how we can make best use of those experiments. So there are like more than 600 experiments. So the first question is always like, which experiments do you start to try? And of course, we can follow this, the initial reasoning why we got this framework. So you can take a look at framework to look at related experiments, but take them in small pieces. Like you may not immediately let multiple feature teams sharing one backlog, but start with one feature team, for example. That makes this kind of experiment smaller. But I would like to actually present an alternative way to make use of those experiments, which is, I call it continuous improvement, inspired by less experiments. So there are two parts. I'm going to first explain this continuous improvement, then explain why this inspired by less experiments part. So what is continuous improvement? Well, I think that the minimum kind of way to do the continuous improvement, to me, is we first try to set up a pace. So based on calendar, right? So we have yearly, quarterly, weekly. So you pick up any reason that you feel right about, and we just set up this pace. So this is one thing. The other thing is we do PDCA, right? We pick up a problem and improvement topic, then we do PDCA on that. So we have improvement topic, which may come with some problem. We would like to solve this problem or improve this issue. Then usually what do we do in the continuous improvement is we define the problem, we analyze it, then eventually we come up with some improvement actions, right? So, but that improvement action are actually experiments, because you don't know, you kind of, there's a hypothesis that you assume, or kind of you have the hypothesis, this action, if we do that, then that will lead our problem solved. Right? But that's a hypothesis. Before you get it done and you verify this works, it's still an experiment. So this is one meaning of this experiment. But this is actually the place where we can look at less experiments for inspiration. But what do we look at from these less experiments? Less experiments says I try something. That something, in a way, is a solution. I think the most important thing is not about solution, but understand the reasoning behind that. So you don't really learn from less experiments about the solution, about how they think, how they reason about this. And so the way that I usually do reasoning is through system modeling. So we can actually model the problem and related less experiments together, and we let them meet in one system model. So I'm going to actually, together with you, to do some system modeling and use one example to kind of elaborate on this approach. So for example, we look at one improvement topic which is related to lexical. That's a common topic, right? So firstly, I call it improvement as usual. What do we do? You see, we have a bunch of lexical. Maybe, well, this is a problem. We have too much lexical. This slows us down, right? Then our kind of quick action or common, normal usual action would be rewrite lexical, right? That's still good. I mean, it's a continuous improvement. We have some idea to improve our things, and that's great. But I think we can do better by getting inspired from those related experiments. Where are they? They are in the first two books, right? So we can open that book, actually second book, and find the chapter called Lexicode. Then there's a bunch of related experiments. Then we can try to model that together with this problem. So we will do that. I actually list a lot of steps, so I would like to invite you to actually do this system modeling together. We have some, what is that called? This magic whiteboard, right? Magic whiteboard. So perhaps, yeah, Rolf will help actually distribute. But if you probably can form a bit bigger group so that we can focus on, let's say, maybe 5, 6 tables. So I will actually do this modeling with you, and while we do this, explaining this approach. Yeah, we use those small Post-it. Actually, I will split this into very small steps so that we don't I'm not going to let you do for 20 minutes, then we just debrief. But it's more like 2-3 minutes, then we will get to the next step and so on. Oh, sorry. Actually, you don't have to move to wall. You just do that on the table, and you put the sticky whiteboard to the table. You just use table space. Okay. All right. Let me explain the first step. Okay. All right? Okay, so the first step, it would be just model this. I said this would be kind of usual idea. While we have this problem, then we do this action, but there's a reasoning behind that, right? So we just use system model to model this part. So we don't go further. So I'll give you 2 minutes, so this should be quick. You think about, what kind of variables are involved here? And what are the links? Yeah, just 2 minutes. For example, just give you some hint. Like I could have one variable called amount of legacy code. Right? Then what does that lead to? And then what do we do in order to influence this variable? Right? Probably 3, 4 variables, then we get some link, it's done. So 2 minutes. Okay, let's quickly do that together. Then we can move to the next step. So actually, yeah, I'm doing this in Miro, and so that later I can easily share it with you. So let's say amount of legacy code, that's the first variable, right? You all got that, right? But we would like to see, okay, the problem is that what does this lead to? You say, okay, we have, it slows us down, right? What's a variable? It could be like development speed or speed. Oh, okay. Make it easy. And so, okay, the amount of legacy code, the more, then the slower, right? So that's maybe minus, or you use the O opposite, right? That's okay. Okay, then the thing is that how do we model that action? Because the action is actually clean up through rewriting. You clean up some legacy code, right? So you introduce a new variable, maybe called, let's say, cleaned legacy code. Well, then you notice that probably then this is the existing legacy code. These are different. Maybe you add existing to just make it more clear. Then so the action, kind of usual action would be, okay, we clean up more legacy code, then that will mean the existing legacy code will be smaller, right? So that's a -2, or that's the opposite 2. So that's how we model this usual action, right? We rewrite, we clean up legacy code, that will lead to the existing legacy code will be smaller, and that increases our speed, right? So just first step, just model the current thinking. So then this is the place, well, if you do continuous improvement as usual, that's it, right? Or you do system thinking, you may kind of diverge a bit and explore different options. But the way that we can get inspired by less experiment is, at this point, we look at what's in the last experiment. So you open this book, there's a chapter called Legacy Code. And you look at this, firstly, you brought the structure. And you found that actually these are experiments. And you notice that actually they are structured into two groups. One group is about, we have legacy code, now what? So how can we deal with the existing legacy code? But there's a bunch of legacy experiments related to avoid writing new legacy code. So what does that mean? If we get back to the model, it could mean actually this amount of existing legacy code, it's sort of like stock. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this idea of stock and inflow and outflow. Then this clean legacy code is an outflow. It will make it decrease, right? But there's an inflow. We haven't thought about that in the previous modeling. So we add that. What would be that? How would you? New lexical. That's easy. So that's that would be this, right? So actually, if you look at here, that's already you get inspiration from that experiment, right? So previously, you only look at this from this outflow perspective. Now you know that, yeah, for this stock, actually, if only we manage this part, we probably never get this problem really solved if we don't manage the inflow. So then you go further, right? You go further. You want to actually look through these experiments, say, which experiment actually, do we have an experiment that say rewrite legacy code? Right? Because our initial idea is to rewrite legacy code. Right? You want to check whether legacy experiment has similar idea. You found it, but in an opposite way. Right? You found it, rewriting legacy code, it's there, but it says avoid. That's interesting, something to learn about, right? Why? Then you dig deeper, you find that, actually, through a book, then you say, you learn about, actually, that's the thing. So if we only clean up, we don't manage the inflow, you never got this problem solved, right? So that explaining why it says avoid rewriting legacy code instead of try rewriting legacy code. Our model will continue. So now we move to the inflow. So we look at this, how we would like to avoid creating new legacy code. Right? These are a bunch of experiments, but there are actually two major causes behind. One is unrealistic deadlines with fixed content. Another one, poor development skill. Then we would see, we have some experiments working with the first cause. Other experiments are working with the second cause. Right? So we can pick up any cause, start to model that part. So we try to elaborate that. We first look at this unrealistic deadline. So let's get back to the model. So now we have the new legacy code. But if you have these two causes, how would you model that? If we don't open up the details in the experiment yet. We just look at these two causes. What are the variables you would like to introduce? What would be the first variable? Unrealistic deadline. So how would you model that with a variable? Yeah, but what's a variable? Like that represent how realistic your deadline is. What would be the word? Realisticness. Or rationality, would that be good? In deadline? I don't know, but anyway, it's, yeah, it's just, oh, okay. It's like when you said how much rational you are. I don't know, being, the degree of being realistic.
Pressure of deadline.
Sorry?
Pressure of deadline.
Pressure of deadline, more pressure. Yeah, could be.
There is no rationality in deadline.
Oh, okay. Oh, deadline itself is already, okay, got it. Being realistic, I can write both. Being realistic in the deadline, in schedule. Yeah, maybe that's better. Okay, so then, pressure may be a bit different. I don't know. If it's not realistic, that creates more pressure. Okay, so something like this, right? What's here? This more pressure, more lexical. Yeah, then this is, okay. So more realistic, less pressure, right? Okay, so how about this development skill? Poor development skill. Develop skill. Yeah, that would be easy. I don't know. Maybe that's good enough. So we have a higher skill. We have fewer lexical, right? So that would be minus. Okay. So now we learn something. We model it, right? Then we move on. So next step would be we elaborate, because there are two major causes. So now we need to dive deeper into the experiments. Let's first dive deeper this part, unrealistic deadline. There are two experiments associated with that. So I would like you actually to perhaps add at least this part. A new, because I guess you haven't had this one yet. So you add this one, this one, this one. But then you, in practice, when you do that in your real work, then you probably already opened that book, right? So you would like to know that why this, let's say, avoid fixed content with unrealistic deadline, how that actually leads to more lexical. Right? I don't know, probably we can try, because we can reason about that without referring to what's in the book. Why? So the next question for your modeling is, why would fixed content with unrealistic deadline lead to new lexical? Well, it's already sort of there, right? Okay. But then why transparency and custom collaboration would actually help avoid that? I will actually give you some time, let's say 5 minutes, to work on this. So would that lead to the lexical? Why transparency and custom collaboration would actually help avoid this new lexical? Summarize this part, then move on to see one more, then we will wrap up. So here I put, this is just one way to model that. It's not the way. So we say we already have this amount of existing lexical leading to lower speed, and that speed will affect the transparency. So if high speed, high transparency, and then the transparency actually will affect, I call it the degree of healthy in custom collaboration. If more transparent, then probably more healthy. Then that will lead to the degree of being realistic in schedule. If it's healthy, it's probably more realistic. So that kind of closes the loop, right? So if you look at here, what is this? Is this reinforcing or balancing? Reinforcing. So yeah. So then maybe we just say this is a reinforcing loop 1. That's it, right? So kind of capturing the learning into the model.
Why does speed increase transparency?
Because customer need to know, because you get something delivered. Hmm? Oh, okay, indeed. So then we need to also have a way to really get that feedback. That's true. Otherwise, the transparency, if you deliver, then nobody is using that, then that doesn't complete the loop.
Then I would at least add the assumption frequency of feedback goes up.
Yeah, that's better. So quite often that we will say, okay, this seems not straightforward to me. So let's reason that, adding more explanation by adding those intermediate variables. That happens quite often. But anyway, we move on, and after this part, and we take a quick look about development skill. That's another major cost, right? And there's a bunch of experiments. So we already, suppose that you already had this variable called developer skill or development skill. Then by looking through these experiments, what variable would you add? Oh, that's the next step. Yeah, maybe 3-4 minutes, then we wrap it. Okay, perhaps we do that together again. Now we shift our focus here, right? So we already have the develop skill. We see learning from those last experiments. We would like to discover new variables that would affect this developer skill. Right? That's learning. So what new variables have you found? Give me some ideas that will affect the developer skill. Hiring standard. Maybe. Let's say, sorry. If we increase hiring standard, it will increase the developer skill. What are the other ways? Learning. Developer learning. Yeah, perhaps we take a look at this together, because we will find something. Those two courses are actually connected. Because when you say developer learning, we have more learning, we have higher skills, right? Then you can ask what actually influences the developer learning. What are the factors? Working as feature team. How would you like make it a variable? Because what's the real factor that benefits sorry? A collaborative work would actually lead to more developer learning. Yeah. Okay. But one thing is that can we create that kind of environment where people can support learning? So this is where this organization supports it. You notice that in the variable, I think not variable in the experiments, there's this thing called increased organization support for learning development skills. It could mean like organizing coding dojos. And there's another important factor, which is actually time. We also need to kind of reserve time, right? But that time would be affected by our schedule. You see? It's all connected. So, because we probably don't have time to model everything, but I hope that you already get some idea, like look at the experiments, try to extract the variables in those experiments and look at the reasoning behind that. And important thing is put that into one model. Kind of like this model is for a theme, for an improvement topic, which is lexical. So we don't look at just one or learn one experiment, but a group of related experiments. Because that will increase effectiveness a lot for our own learning. I mean, to get inspired by less experiments. So perhaps I stop here, because we can go on, definitely. I actually, to prepare this, I had done a few times, with some differences, but I will share this with you, this mirror link, I probably could, yeah. So let's get back here. So we can continue, we can look at the clean up old lexi part, and but eventually, we need to get back to our improvement, right? We model these things. How can we take that learning and make some changes in our continuous improvement? There are two things. Suppose that you have this new model with the new understanding. You probably will change your problem. You may change your problem definition. Of course, you may also change your action. You may say, oh, now the problem is not really too much lexical, but creating too much lexical, which is caused by our unrealistic deadline and our poor development skills. Now you shifted the problem from lexical to working on these things, right? Then talking about action, you may say, oh, maybe because unrealistic deadline will immediately leading to sacrificing the qualities and leading to more lexical. Probably we would like to strengthen this definition of done, and so on. Right? So this is what I call the continuous improvement inspired by less experiments. I hope it's concrete enough that you can, it's like if you already have PDCA, you just at a certain point during your planning analysis step, then you just take this less experiments. I will have two things to conclude. So we said that we can focus on experiments before adopting framework or after, right? Before, meaning that we would like to grow our change capability. Right? By doing this, learning, understanding the dynamics, we do that. And afterwards, it means we continuously improve. Right? We don't stop after adopting the framework. But what if we already do that, why do we have to adopt a framework? Why don't we just continuously experiment? Sometimes we just make a big experiment, other times small experiment. Like those organizational change, they by themselves, they are all experiments, right? So we can also, if some organization you don't like framework, but you can still benefit from that. By doing this, actually, Bast and Craig, in the first 2 books, they call it experiment-only approach. Right? So this is one thing. Another thing is regarding to this get inspired. We often say that we get some inspiration from something. This would be a very concrete way to get inspired. Right? The real thing, I think the key thing is not really about those specific experiments. Once you extract those variables, you can come up with your own experiments. Right? You may have a different way to influence the same variables. Because that really matters. Right? Yeah, that's my conclusion. That's it. Okay. Question? Yeah.
If you can share, let's say if I'm going to try coaching using only like experiments, I want to understand a bit of logistic around that, like who are doing these models with me, and when we conduct experiment and meet together, who are the group of target people that I'm working with, this one. And second, like how do I charge my coaching fees? How the contract look like? Is it per experiment or it's time-based or something like that?
I probably cannot answer the second question.
Okay.
But anyway, the first one is usually when I just go to any places, I look at if there's any existing improvement pace. If there's already some improvement pace, I just join that. You probably already have like maybe every now and then have some session to pick up a problem, try to improve that. I just join. Right? So we can only do the analysis in the system modeling without looking at experiments. We can do that too, right? It's just less experiments is just additional inspiration that you can borrow, right? Because let's say if we don't look at less experiments, the model itself is limited by our kind of group understanding and insights. It's limited by our own experience and knowledge, right? By looking at less experiments, it just expand. So back to Chochai's question. So I do this with the people who are already solving their problem and improving things. It could be managers, scrum masters, the team itself.
When that group doesn't exist yet?
That's the first thing you want to introduce. So that's what I call continuous improvement as usual. Like you first getting that, you don't need to really make it very fancy. You just I think the easiest thing would be just reserve some time. Make a calendar reservation. Like monthly, we have 2 hours to look at our problems, any problem. Then we can actually connect to this approach. Okay.
2 minutes.
Okay. Okay. By the way, if you are interested in this approach, you would like to kind of try it with your own problem, because I pick up this lexic code as an example problem. But any problem, by the way, I have actually developed a one-day workshop about this. And let me see if I can share with you. Yeah, this is lexical. And, but maybe your problem is in the theme of requirement collaboration. then you can do the same, right? You first have a kind of a usual improvement action, then you model that, then you look at these related experiments. I already prepared, like let's say if you have problems that you want to improve regarding high-performing team and continuous integration and so on. So if you are interested in taking your concrete problem, then you want to try this approach, we can take up some open space slots. Yeah, thank you.